Good afternoon. This is a CBS News special report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York, where deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro is about to be arraigned in a federal courthouse downtown. It has been an eventful morning for Maduro and a more than eventful 3 days. Just hours ago, as you can see on your screen now, he was taken by helicopter from a Brooklyn detention center, where he and his wife are being held in separate solitary cells, to Lower Manhattan. From there, he and his wife were loaded into an armored vehicle, a Bearcat, under heavy guard, and driven by motorcade into the courthouse. Less than 72 hours before that, the authoritarian leader and his wife Celia were at home in bed before being captured in a surprise U.S. military operation early Saturday morning. They are now facing narco, terrorism, and drug charges, among others, and will enter a plea any moment now, which is why we are on the air. If convicted, they could face decades in prison. CBS News chief correspondent Matt Gutman is joining us now. He is live outside of the courtroom. Matt, what a day here. You've got dueling protests. I hear the voices behind you, and you've got this extraordinary shift in circumstances for the leader of a very significant South American country. What's the mood like where you are?
And one of the nations with the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Right behind us, and you did hear those chants, there are basically two opposing demonstrations happening here. One on my right is Venezuelans who support his detention and arraignment today, who believe that he should have been taken out of the country and deposed. On the other side, people who oppose U.S. intervention. And what you heard is those two sides kind of clashing. Now, just a second before we came on the air, NYPD moved in, sort of separating the two sides. I think to some degree that also encapsulates what's happening in the country. You might be able to see some of the press behind me, dozens of reporters there, dozens additionally all facing the court ahead of that arraignment, which is set to happen any moment now. We know opposing counsel are in court. Both the public defender for Maduro and his wife are there, and of course the prosecution will be there. We're not yet sure if Maduro has entered the courtroom, but that will happen. And Tony, he's expected to plead not guilty to the four charges against him, which include conspiracy for narco-terrorism, conspiracy to traffic cocaine into the United States, and various weapons charges. These are serious charges. He could face, and they both could face, decades in prison if convicted, but it is going to not be an easy conviction. There's some question about the validity of the evidence that the U.S. has accumulated against him, specifically as the alleged kingpin of a drug cartel. So not going to be necessarily an easy road. There is consensus, however, about the fact that almost every legal analyst that we have spoken to believe that he can get a fair trial here in the United States, Tony.
Hey, Matt, while we have you, I see the barricade behind you, and then behind you, additional barricades. We saw the armored vehicle earlier this morning, the heavy armed guard around Maduro as he was transferred from the helicopter to the courthouse. What are you seeing there and reporting, hearing about in terms of security today?
You can hear some of that security passing by us right now. Obviously, massive amounts of security right outside the courthouse here. And I think you probably saw that video, and people have been watching it all weekend long, of Maduro being flown in on a Department of Justice jet from somewhere in the Caribbean, of Maduro then choppered to Brooklyn or to New York to the DEA headquarters, shuffled in wearing that tracksuit and slides, and then very cordially greeting the DEA officials who might have had a hand in detaining him, saying Happy New Year and good night. And then, of course, this morning being flown from Brooklyn to Manhattan in that helicopter and taken off with all that security around him, then driven here in a Bearcat, one of those armored vehicles. So tremendous security and obviously an enormous amount of interest in this case, Tony.
All right, Matt, thank you very much. Criminal defense attorney Caroline Polisi is with me now. Caroline, thank you very much for being here. We just got word from inside the courtroom. We want to let our viewers know that Maduro and his wife have entered the room. This is courtroom 26A. You know what's going to happen there. What is the process for a day like today?
Yeah, so today is going to be largely procedural. I don't think we will get any bombshell news. The one thing I was looking for today, which we just realized, is that he has retained a private attorney. Previously, he had a court-appointed attorney. It looks like he's retained a pretty well-known a high-profile criminal defense attorney. He actually represented Julian Assange in his New York cases. But
Barry Pollock, right?
Yeah, that's right, Barry Pollock. And so it does seem as though, today will be largely procedural. He will be read the charges against him, those 4 conspiracy counts. He will be asked if he understands those charges, and then he'll enter a plea, likely of not guilty. Given the fact that he now is the retained attorney, I would expect we will see some very robust chest puffing in terms of arguments that they plan to make regarding the illegality of this prosecution.
Let's talk about that for a second, because the protests outside, they're waving signs saying, well, the ones that do not support the Trump administration's actions, there's cheers and celebrations. But on the other side, you have people saying this is an illegal act. That is the #1 criticism. What does the law say about that?
Yeah, it's complicated. There are legal scholars debating this ad infinitum, academically, sort of online, and you can read all of that. Bottom line, international law, yes, this likely did violate international law, but this is not without precedent. I want to make that clear. People are saying this is sort of a move out of the blue. 1989, almost 36 years to the day ago, George H.W. Bush extracted a rogue dictator in Panama, Manuel Noriega, and prosecuted him on American soil. All of the same issues were raised there, and people were crying afoul that this did run afoul of the law. Bill Barr had written a memo, an Office of Legal Counsel memo, previously about 6 months prior to that, stating that under United States law, constitutionally, it's okay for the FBI to use military force to extract a rogue dictator, right? We don't recognize Maduro as the president of Venezuela. We say he is illegitimate, therefore he's not going to get sovereign immunity here. All of those arguments will be made in this case, and I expect the court will follow those precedents to maintain this prosecution.
There's so much in the balance here for the future of Venezuela, for American policy in the region, for Donald Trump politically and personally. But there's also a lot at stake right here in terms of the freedom of Maduro. What does he face if convicted of all of these charges laid out in this indictment, he and his wife?
Yeah, I mean, decades behind bars. If he gets convicted on all 4 counts, you're looking at 30, 40 years to life in prison. Wow. So these are serious charges. Narco trafficking conspiracy carries a hefty sentence. Also, I would note, Tony, there is a forfeiture allegation here, right? Because so the conspiracy was not only for drug trafficking in and of itself, but to enrich, him personally, his family personally, and other top leaders in Venezuela. So there is a large amount of money at stake here that the government is wanting back.
Yeah. They're saying facilitating thousands of tons of cocaine into the country
per year,
running state-sponsored gangs, murders and kidnappings. Very, very serious stuff. Caroline, thank you very much. I want to go now to senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who joins us, I believe, from West Palm Beach. Ed, the politics here are very complicated. They move in a lot of different directions. And I think, oh no, he's at the White House. That's not West Palm Beach at all. A little bit colder. The politics here are moving in a lot of different directions. I understand as we speak, or sometime very soon, members of the Trump administration will be briefing some very upset members of Congress who did not have any kind of heads up about this operation in Venezuela. What do you know about that?
Tony, good to see you. Yes, the president got here back to the White House last night, so he is here today. We're not currently scheduled to see him in public during the course of today, but as you mentioned, senior administration officials, including the Secretary of State, the Defense Secretary, the CIA Director, are set to brief what's called the Gang of Eight, who are the most senior lawmakers who are supposed to be briefed on a regular basis in classified settings about sensitive national security matters, plus the top Republicans and Democrats on the House and Senate Armed Services and Foreign Relations committees. That won't happen until later this afternoon, early this evening, and we'll see, although it's a classified setting, to what extent the justifications are explained yet again, because there is still some confusion, not only here in Washington among policymakers, but around the world, as to what exactly the United States is up to now in Venezuela, and perhaps most recently now conveyed by the UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, speaking before a special meeting of the UN Security Council this morning, reiterating what Secretary Rubio said on Sunday on Face the Nation and in other places, that there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco trafficker who's now going to stand trial in the United States. But that differs from what President Trump was telling reporters last night on his flight back here to Washington. He said repeatedly, "We're in charge," would not provide any specifics about how exactly that's being done, but continued his focus on securing and controlling the flow of Venezuela's oil supply and ensuring that American interests are represented chiefly there in that regard. And of course has also now expressed interest potentially in expanding military operations to other corners of the Western Hemisphere should leaders in those countries not adhere to U.S. values, most notably Colombia, saying it's run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the U.S., raising questions about Cuba, saying it's, quote, ready to fall, and that Cuban Americans will be very happy about it, and raising the prospects of possibly taking action inside Mexico because he blames Mexico's president for not doing more to combat the drug cartels there. So lots of confusion still. We'll see if those senior lawmakers emerge later this evening with answers to their questions, especially about what's next for the U.S. involvement in Venezuela.
Yeah, lawmakers and politicians around the world gathering to talk about this. But you put your finger on, I think, what is most important here, which is the significant political gap between the law enforcement action, that explanation for this move in Venezuela, and then the comments about running the country or dictating the next steps of the country to the installed leadership that's currently there. I know you'll be following that for us, Ed. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I want to bring in senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett, who can cover the military side of this for us. Charlie, still offshore of Venezuela and in that region in the Caribbean is the largest gathering of soldiers and sailors in more than 50 years, as I understand it. What is their mission there now?
Well, you know, I spoke to those military officials this morning. They really haven't budged even since the raid. So this huge military buildup that you and I have been following for the past few months, spearheaded by the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, the largest and most advanced aircraft carrier in the world. On board, it's bristling with F-18 fighter jets or F-35s in Puerto Rico. Those will remain. The F-35s took part in that raid in Venezuela. The Reaper drones are based in Puerto Rico as well. There are something like 11 warships that remain there and a whole slew of aircraft. And we're learning more about the raid itself. So even though the F-18 fighter jets, F-22s, F-35s were involved in sort of paving the way for these Delta Force agents to get in there, they still took fire. They were flying in at about 100 feet. So as they got closer to the Maduro compound, they faced firefights, and a handful of U.S. service members were injured. President Trump said one of them was pretty badly injured. A helicopter took fire, according to General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but it was flyable, and those pilots were able to get that helicopter back out. Now, in addition to that, maybe dozens of Venezuelans were killed in the raid. But interestingly, Cuba announced that 32 of its citizens, describing them as members of the armed forces and intelligence services, were killed during that raid, which sort of underlines the level of cooperation between Cuba and Venezuela, both overt and covert, that we're not exactly sure where these individuals were stationed because there were a couple of military bases that were hit in addition to the compound, but we can assume that they were also part of Maduro's inner circle and security teams.
All right, Charlie, thank you very much. I just got a note here from our producer in the courthouse. I want to let our viewers know that 12:02 p.m., the judge entered the courtroom and all rose. The judge said, it is my job and my intent to ensure that this is a fair trial and a fair proceeding. So we will keep following what goes on in that courtroom. No cameras allowed in, but we are getting reports from the courthouse, and we'll let you know. Meanwhile, Lilia Luciano is on the Colombia-Venezuela border. They are not letting reporters into the country, as I understand it. Lilia, what are you witnessing there?
That's right, Tony. This is a very dynamic border. Right now, what you're seeing are cars that are coming from Venezuela directly here. I kind of want to set the scene on what's happening in Venezuela. Right now, there is some semblance of stability. There is calm. It seems like there is unity among the people who are in power, but I am getting messages from people in Venezuela who say that the colectivos, the urban gangs who are loyal to the regime, are keeping that order by surveilling, by stopping people in checkpoints on the road, by checking people's social media, by asking people whether or not they supported the strike. So the regime is still very much felt. I want to remind you that Maduro was the head of the regime, but his closest circle of power is still there. The Minister of Defense, who controls the armed forces, is still there. You also have Diosdado Cabello, who has been historically Maduro's henchman, the person who controls those informal gangs or groups, who maintains the fear and who persecutes the people who express their free speech, and the people who, as we saw when we were there as the only network team on the ground covering the election, the people who rose up, the people who protested, the people who supported because they voted for the opposition, and Maduro held on to power, breaking every promise that the regime had made to the U.S. And that, of course, brings us to here. All of those people are still repressed. They are waiting for some kind of negotiation to lead to some kind of democracy. But the person in power, of course, is the vice president. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut you off here. I want to let our viewers know that we just saw that Maduro in court said, "I am an innocent man. I'm not guilty. I'm a decent man." That's a direct quote. I want to go back to CBS News chief correspondent Matt Gutman, who's at the federal courthouse. Matt, this sounds like a dramatic moment here. We've got notes from our producer inside. Maduro taking notes, staring at his paperwork. Then this dramatic moment, he rises and addresses the courthouse. What did he say? What was the reaction?
I mean, it was very interesting and indeed a dramatic moment in court, Tony. Initially, the judge said, "Are you Nicolás Maduro?" To which he answered, "I'm the president of Venezuela. I was captured at my home." And the judge cut him off and said, "I just need to know your name." It continues with Maduro then waiving his right to the judge reading the indictment. The judge read him his rights, and Maduro said, "I didn't know these rights. Your honors inform me of them now." And then, as you said, he said, it didn't appear to actually enter a plea, and we're still trying to verify if that is the case. He said, "I am innocent. I'm not guilty. I'm a decent man. I'm still president of my country." His wife also entered a plea of not guilty, or her attorney did on her behalf. And there's still this conversation happening right now, Tony, about whether he's seen the indictment, whether he knows what's in it, and whether he has been informed of his rights. Again, this is just the initial proceeding in what could be a very long judicial proceeding with Maduro and his wife on these indictments, the first of very many. It does appear that he is entering a plea of not guilty, and this is still going on. The judge is just trying to say, hey, listen, we are here just to ensure that there is a fair trial. There will be more further on. You will have an opportunity to say your piece later on. But right now, we just need to know that you know your rights, that we know who you are, and that you enter a plea. Yeah. So this is ongoing right now, an incredibly dramatic moment in court, Tony.
Dramatic moment in court. You know, people are getting alerts on their phones. You can hear the protesters right by Matt there. And you can see for our viewers, we have a blog going on the right-hand side of your screen that shows what we know when we know it. Not guilty pleas from both Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. I want to bring in Caroline Polisi, again, our legal correspondent here, analyst, for more on what we just witnessed. Maduro appears to have begun to speak on his own behalf in a broader way about who he was and why he thinks this is unjust, and the judge cuts him off.
Yeah, that's about as dramatic as it gets for an initial appearance and an arraignment, and I'm not surprised that Judge Hellerstein cut him off. He's not allowed to speak in open court. His attorney will speak to him. He answers yes to who he is, and he enters the plea of not guilty. Now, it's interesting that he noted something to the effect of that he didn't understand either the charges against him or his rights.
Rights, yeah.
Because that's what an arraignment is. We need to know, part of the system is that you know what's happening, and I would be surprised if his attorney hadn't gone down. I mean, that's what you do as a defense attorney. You go over in detail what is being alleged. So I would think that they would stop the proceedings to make sure that he understands, because that's a pretty big part of the puzzle here.
Can we talk about the clothes that both Maduro and his wife are wearing here, just to set the scene so people can picture it? He's in orange sneakers. They're both in identical tan kind of jumpsuits. Yeah. Feet are shackled, orange short sleeves underneath, layered underneath. And their hands are unshackled so that when they rise, they can speak freely. Is this a typical wardrobe for this kind of appearance? Why not street clothes? Why not a suit?
Yeah, so oftentimes defense attorneys will fight really hard to get their clients in street clothes or in, a suit and tie, mostly for prejudicial effects in front of a jury. Obviously, there's no jury here today. Likely, his defense attorney hasn't had enough time to sort of, liaise with the prosecution. It's also a Bureau of Prisons issue in terms of the safety and security. They make that call. It's not the prosecutors necessarily. But I would expect that the defense attorneys will make immediate motions to get them in civilian clothing for all future appearances.
All right, Caroline, thank you very much. I want to go back to CBS News Chief Correspondent Matt Gutman, who is back outside the courthouse. Matt, what are you hearing?
You know, Caroline just made a really interesting point about the orange sneakers, the tan suit, and your question of why isn't he in civilian clothes, and how he's dressed right now and how his wife, Celia Flores, is dressed. It's also a stark reminder, Tony, of where they are being housed. The Metropolitan Detention Center, one of the roughest, most notorious jails in the entire country. That's where Luigi Mangione is. That's where other very high-profile inmates have been, including Ghislaine Maxwell, Sean Diddy Combs, and others. And it is a notorious place because it's kept exceedingly cold. In fact, the main commodity there is socks, because people wear 3 pairs of them at a time. The food, I'm told, is abysmal by lawyers who've been there many times. It's moldy. They say it's not fit for human consumption. So it's a far cry from the palaces he's used to in Caracas. And again, these proceedings are still going on. And there is an interesting note to be made here about the extreme care being made by the judge and the prosecution as well as the defense for due process here. They want to make sure that this is done fairly. They want to make sure that the Maduros have been read their rights, that they understand their Miranda rights, that they don't have to say anything. And it's a far cry from virtually no due process that anybody in the opposition would receive in Venezuela. People who are not entitled to due process, who are dumped into black sites run by the intelligence apparatuses there and by the police, and often never heard from again. So some very strong duality that we're seeing right here, right now.
It's remarkable and a really unbelievable shift in circumstances. You mentioned the lifestyle that he was living as the leader of Venezuela. He goes to bed in Venezuela Saturday night as that leader with that lifestyle, wakes up Monday morning in the hands of the DEA, and is now in a downtown courthouse. Matt, I understand we have some footage of the protests going on around you. We can hear them. They're getting louder as more news comes out of the courthouse. What are you seeing on these signs? What are people saying?
There are dozens of people, actually probably hundreds of people out here, and I would say many dozens of LAPD trying to enforce the peace. So on one side, you have Venezuela Libertad, Venezuela liberty, freedom. And on the other side, no U.S. war in Venezuela, USA hands off Venezuela, no more bombing of Venezuela. There's something else, down with the fascists. Does not seem that the people who are opposed to Maduro having been snatched out of Caracas in the middle of the night, that many of them are actually from Venezuela or have any connection to it. I don't see Venezuelan flags on that side, and it does seem that everybody on the side that is supporting the judicial process right now, that supports him being arrested, they are all entirely Venezuelan. So an interesting juxtaposition between these two clashing sides. And again, I don't think we have seen anything beyond very mild pushing and some shouting at this point. But obviously the LAPD is keeping a very close eye on it right now.
Matt, you're in New York now. You've joined CBS News here on the East Coast. But I hear you. I understand. I want to bring in senior national. Yeah, a little reminder for you there. I'll be saying good morning to people, not good evening, for a long time. But I want to bring in our senior national security correspondent, Charlie D'Agata, who's got more on the military situation. Charlie, we're all sort of holding our breath here because there's this huge difference between what the Trump administration is saying about the future of Venezuela and the resistance protest language you're hearing from the leadership of Venezuela. And that makes everybody a little bit worried that the military might have another mission here soon. What do you know?
Yeah, well, this is the reason for this forward military posture, the largest posture that has been seen there in decades, because the Trump administration has already warned that they are ready to strike Venezuela again, because we remember that Maduro may have left, but his regime is still very much intact. And there are a number of people within that regime that are still wanted by the United States, as Maduro was. So this maximum pressure is still there. and they will start pushing more pressure on this Venezuelan regime. But in addition to that, we've talked about the oil tankers. A number of oil tankers, according to open source intelligence, have actually left Venezuela, getting through that U.S. blockade. Again, not suggesting that this regime is cooperating with the U.S. authority in that region. As a matter of fact, we've learned that the U.S. military is tracking one of those cargo tankers and may be considering an interdiction. So this is all a very dynamic situation there. And the U.S. military, we call it strike packages. They had those targets in place. And when President Trump says we were ready to launch another wave, you can be sure that that strike package is still intact and those targets are still intact. And you certainly have a multitude of U.S. military assets if that option is taken.
Chilling reminder of the American power there in the region. Charlie, thank you very much. I want to go back to criminal defense attorney Caroline Polisi for more on what happens next, right? So we've got an arraignment. We have 2 not guilty pleas. We have the indictment read. How soon could this go to a jury? We're going to see evidence. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, saying all Americans should read the indictment.
Yeah.
When are people going to hear about the evidence?
They should read the indictment because it does sort of read like a novel. Very high level, I would note, not a lot of meat. But this is going to take a while. So there are going to, I mean, this is not your average drug trafficking conspiracy. There are obviously the issues that you raised regarding the legality of the raid and the way in which he was brought on American soil. Those will eventually get into separate spheres. The ongoing occupation of Venezuela, essentially, the government is arguing, is sort of a byproduct of this DOJ operation with FBI to extract 2 indicted individuals. They're really focusing on that aspect of it to maintain the constitutionality of it, right? This is not an act of war because lawmakers are already sort of, up in arms over it. But that part will be separated pretty quickly. They will make motions regarding that. But again, the judge will likely follow this precedent that we have saying, regardless of how he was brought to American soil, that's not my job to pontificate on. And he has jurisdiction over him now, and then it will proceed like any other criminal case.
I'm going to ask maybe a dumb question, but I think one that will be on people's minds. Nicolás Maduro is not an unknown figure like a normal defendant might be. He's not an anonymous figure. There are years and years and years of high-quality journalism reporting. Human rights organizations have reported on that detail a regime that has been engaged in torture, starvation, the complete collapse of the economy, general misery, political violence, you name it. All that stuff is public record. That's why you see such a strong reaction from so many Venezuelans saying, we want this guy gone, and yesterday. Is that admissible in any regard into this court conversation? No.
No. One of the beauties of our criminal justice system is that you can't find somebody guilty of a crime based on their character. The rules of evidence famously do not let in other bad acts, we call it. I mean, there are loopholes. If it somehow relates to the offense conduct, maybe some of that could come in. But in general, no, you can't convict somebody just because they're a bad guy. Now, Matt was referencing whether or not he can get a fair trial in the United States. I do believe that he can. It will take a rigorous vetting process from prosecutors and defense attorneys. They'll go through a vigorous voir dire process. I'm sure you've covered them before. The Sean Combs case took days and days because you want to root out people that maybe have pre-existing prejudices or know a lot about the circumstances there to be fair and impartial.
Does that mean potentially there wouldn't be Venezuelans on the jury?
Potentially. I mean, you get a number of strikes just for cause and without cause. It depends. I would imagine that Maduro and his attorneys will have a jury consultant. There's a whole cottage industry out there in terms of what types of jurors they will want to pick. But I do believe that, just as Matt said too, it makes you proud to be an American. He is being afforded every due process right that an American citizen would on this soil. And the criminal justice system sort of bends over backwards to make sure that that's in place. Both the prosecution and obviously the defense will want this to be a clean trial with no prejudice to it, because they want, if they get a conviction, they want it to be upheld on appeal.
Yeah, and a stark contrast between the way Americans in Venezuelan courts under Maduro have been treated, according to all the reporting on that. Let's bring our senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe back in. Ed, I know you're following the situation with the oil in Venezuela, obviously massive known reserves there. the White House suggesting that American companies are going to go in and get it. What do you know on that front?
Well, let me convey one other bit of information, Tony, we've just learned in the last few minutes. You may be wondering, where is the president in the midst of all of this? Obviously, the wheels of justice are turning up there in New York City. We're told by an aide who's working with him right now that he's in the Oval Office monitoring events, but not necessarily watching television coverage. There isn't obviously anything to be watching from inside that courtroom, but he is aware of what's going on. Again, he's not scheduled to be seen publicly today, at least so far, and will leave much of the explaining to senior officials who are set to meet with senior lawmakers later. Oil, of course, is going to be most likely a big part of that conversation. To what extent is that what the U.S. is most concerned about now? How exactly is the U.S. going to assess the petroleum supply there in Venezuela? Remember, it's believed, or at least at one time, they had the largest known petroleum reserves in the world. The issue, though, is that so much of the infrastructure around it has been allowed to fall into disrepair over the course of the Chavez and Maduro governments. And so there is a desire by American firms and other international petroleum firms to get back into Venezuela and begin developing those fields again. But it will cost tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars over time to make that happen, to employ the correct people, and to then ultimately get the oil out. And so while there may be interest, and there have been reports that some business groups are already making plans to visit in the coming days or weeks, it could be several years until full development and extraction is capable.
Yeah, and then, of course, then if anything would happen, like lower gas prices here in the U.S., but we will be talking to Jill Schlesinger later on the Evening News about that. Ed, thank you very much. In our waning time, I want to go back to CBS News Chief Correspondent Matt Gutman from outside the federal courthouse. Matt, I understand this arraignment has wrapped up. How did it end?
Back up.
Matt, can you hear me? How did this end, this arraignment? The judge has given a date for another appearance?
Yeah, on March 17th, that's the next status date. You can hear the protesters, the demonstrators still going at it against the opposition here. And both at this point, both Flores, who is Nicolás Maduro's wife, and Nicolás Maduro have pleaded not guilty. Interestingly, they have also waived their right to a bail at this point so that they can properly address bail issue at some point in the near future, hoping that they might be able to get released on bail. Now, something interesting just about the tone of these proceedings, Tony. It has been incredibly cordial and professional. The judge made pains to know that Maduro understood the interpretation. Maduro said it was satisfactory and good enough that I was able to take notes. And then he asked the judge, will I be able to keep my notes? And I don't want, other interference with them. I want them to be kept private. And the judge acceded to that request. Now they're talking about health and medical issues that the Maduros might face, that they might need some additional attention, and the judge is willing to hear that. Interestingly, we are now learning that Flores, Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, may have fractured or had some severe bruising on her ribs, according to her attorney. And we saw that image earlier of Maduro being walked off the helicopter into that Bearcat armored vehicle, and it looked like he was limping. And there's some question about whether he was perhaps injured in some way during his capture in Venezuela. So those questions are being hammered out. Of course, the nuts and bolts, the most important part to know is that he has pleaded not guilty, as has his wife. The judge has set the next status hearing for March 17th, Tony.
March 17th, 11 a.m. We see on the right-hand side of the screen. We have a live picture up because we understand Maduro might be led out of the courtroom soon. That reference there from Matt about the medical attention is a reminder that we're talking about a 63-year-old and a 69-year-old in Celia Flores. As we wait the video we think we're going to get here of Maduro, I want to go back to Lilia Luciano on the Colombia-Venezuelan border because she's got some reporting on what could happen next in Venezuela. The interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, Lilia, if you can hear me, who is she? And then you've got Maria Machado, the recent Nobel Peace Prize winner, opposition leader. What are her prospects for taking power back?
I'm so glad that you're asking that question, Tony. There is a kind of split screen happening in the minds of Venezuelans, both in Venezuela and outside right now. And people who I've talked to who are here in Colombia waiting to go back say, okay, without Maduro, the logical question would be that the election that happened in 2024 the person who won that election would rise to power. That's not Maria Corina Machado, and stay with me. The reason it's because the Maduro regime banned her from running. But her candidate, according to people in exile, according to people against the regime, should be the person who the U.S. should be propping up. The person who is the leader of the opposition is Maria Corina Machado. Instead, the Trump administration is negotiating at this moment with a person who was the number 2 to Maduro, the VP. Right now, what we know about Delcy Rodriguez is that she's telling people in Venezuela that the proper president is Maduro. She had to assume the role of the president because of what happened over the weekend, but she was his vice president. She has been an important figure of the regime for a long time. She has been Minister of Oil. She has been Minister of the Exterior. She has held important positions in the assembly. She comes from a family. I mean, her father was known worldwide for abducting an American back in the 70s. This is a person who has been part of Chavismo, of socialism, of what has run Venezuela over the last nearly 30 years. And now she's the one who's having conversations with the Trump administration. She is, by the measure of the regime, potentially consider it a little bit more moderate. She's used to negotiating on matters of sanctions, of oil, and so perhaps she's somebody that the Trump administration could trust to follow through to a certain degree, to perhaps abide by those conditions that they had offered Maduro, according to Secretary Rubio and to Trump, and that he continued to reject. But does she have the kind of support? Can she unify the extremely polarized country that is Venezuela? That is a very big question, and she's going to need a lot of powerful allies in there and out in the United States to avoid a crisis that we would feel immediately here, especially on the issue of migration.
Yeah, there is so much at stake. Lilia, behind you, we see the armored vehicles and the guards. Are we looking into Venezuela there, or is Venezuela in front of you?
Well, we are looking into Colombia. Venezuela is here to my left. There is the bridge where the cars are coming in. So the cars you're seeing behind me are coming from Venezuela. These armored vehicles are here because Colombia is foreseeing that there could be that migration crisis I mentioned. Every time that the regime has gripped to power, every time that the economy has gotten worse, every time that they have persecuted en masse, like what happened when what we saw during that last election, people leave Venezuela. They come to Colombia. But there's another reason why they're here, and this is something that the Minister of Defense explained to me. He said, look, if, in fact, the regime figures that are in power, specifically Delcy Rodriguez, follows what Trump is demanding, follows what the U.S. expects, that means that she's going to have to crack down on the illegal organized crime groups that are running drugs in Venezuela. If she does that, Colombia expects that they are going to start spilling over into Colombia. And Colombia's already existing problem of violence, of trafficking, of turf war is only going to get worse. So that's what these guys are truly preparing for here.
Yeah. Lilia, thank you very much. A lot to keep our eyes on, and we know you'll do it for us. I want to let our viewers know, once again, if you're just joining us, the ousted Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores have just pleaded not guilty to drug and weapons charges in a New York City federal courthouse. It comes less than 72 hours after they were captured in a surprise U.S. military raid in Caracas, capturing them in their bedroom as they tried to make their way into a steel room. The judge on this Monday announced that the next court appearance after those not guilty pleas will come on March 17th at 11 a.m. A lot of time before then. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight with me on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York.
This is CBS News New York.
Breaking news, former Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro appearing inside a Manhattan courtroom, the not guilty pleas as the entire world watches.
A car slams into a school building in New Jersey, the damage left behind and the student injured.
And a 5-alarm blaze at a Bronx deli, the injuries as firefighters struggle to get the flames under control. Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Hsu.
And I'm Mary Calvi. Now on air and streaming on CBS News New York. Ousted Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro left court just moments ago after he and his wife pleaded not guilty. They made their way to Manhattan this morning via helicopter and armored truck after the Maduros spent the night in a Brooklyn jail.
The motorcade carrying Maduro arrived at the courthouse in the last few hours. Maduro is facing 4 charges: narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices.
We have live team coverage. Masa Saidi spoke to people rallying for and against Maduro, but we begin with Ali Bauman live outside the courthouse. Ali, what do we know?
Mary and Cindy, as you mentioned, the arraignment just wrapped up moments ago. We have our colleague Alice Gaynor inside the courthouse. She's been taking notes, sending them to us about what's been going on inside of that courtroom. So Nicolás Maduro and his wife, they entered the courtroom just after 12 noon wearing prison garb, tan jumpsuit, orange sneakers, their feet shackled. Their hands were, though, unshackled, and they were able to shake the hands of their attorneys as they entered. Now, as typical with an arraignment, the judge began to read the indictment and began to read the charges against them. They actually waived their right to hear the indictment, saying that they had already gone through that with their attorneys. At one point, Nicolás Maduro told the judge through an interpreter, I'm quoting here, quote, "I'm innocent, I'm not guilty, I'm a decent man, and I'm still president of my country." Celia Flores, his wife, also entered a not guilty plea, and now this is just day one of what's expected to be a years-long legal case.
Nicolás Maduro and wife Celia Flores arrived in Manhattan early this morning, helicoptered from the notorious federal prison in Brooklyn, where they have been held since arriving in the U.S. Surrounded by armed agents, the couple got into an armored vehicle and were driven in the middle of Monday morning rush hour to federal court in Lower Manhattan. The Maduros are scheduled to be arraigned this afternoon on 4 counts, including narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and 2 weapons-related charges.
There will be more security around him, obviously, but it will be fairly procedural.
After the U.S. military's operation to capture the Venezuelan president and first lady in Caracas early Saturday, President Trump says the U.S. is now in charge of the country.
Venezuela right now is a dead country. We have to bring it back, and we're going to have big investments by the oil companies to bring back the infrastructure.
On Capitol Hill, some lawmakers are denouncing the operation as illegal.
The U.S. invading another nation to knock over its leadership gives a green light to other dictators around the world like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping to do the same.
He was never the legitimate leader. He is not the rightful president. Indeed, he is a criminal that has now been brought here to the United States to face justice, as he should have been a long time ago.
The Trump administration is counting on Maduro's former deputy, Delcy Rodriguez, now sworn in as Venezuela's interim president, to comply. Over the weekend, Trump told The Atlantic magazine, quote, "If she doesn't do what's right, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro."
Now, Nicolás Maduro and his wife are due back in court here on March 17th. Now, also named in this indictment are co-defendants who will not be in court today. They include Nicolás Maduro's son, Venezuela's interior minister, as well as a leader of the gang Tren de Aguas. Now, later this evening, select members of Congress will receive a briefing on Venezuela by Trump administration officials. Mary and Cindy.
And Ali, what have we learned about the attorneys representing the Maduros?
Yes, we've learned that Nicolás Maduro has retained a private attorney by the name of Barry Pollock. He is a D.C.-based attorney, and he's most notably known for perhaps representing the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange.
Ali Bauman, thank you.
The Cuban government says 32 Cubans, including military or intelligence personnel, were killed during the U.S. military operations.
Maduro's capture has been met with strong reaction from Venezuelans, some happy that he's been arrested, others angry with the United States' actions.
Masa Saidi is live in Lower Manhattan speaking with people on both sides. And Masa, what are they telling you?
Cindy, Mary, groups of people have gathered here outside the courthouse all morning. There are so many reporters and so many security officers here that it's hard to estimate the size of the crowd. But take a look. We estimate roughly 100 people. There are dueling protests underway right now. Those who support the capture of Nicolás Maduro and those who are against it. We've been speaking with Venezuelans all morning, as you said. A man who came here from Caracas in 1992, he says that President Trump, quote, kidnapped his country's president, and he believes that this is just about stealing Venezuela's oil. But a young woman from Venezuela, she's celebrating what President Trump did. She says that she believes that his intentions are good. She came to the United States 3 years ago after she says Maduro took away the independence of her university. She's been working, living here with her boyfriend, trying to support her family back home. Listen.
I'm feeling very, very happy, very, very excited. We're waiting for this time. So 26 years, I want to go back. This is my dream, back with my family.
I support the independence of Venezuela. That oil is over there and belong to the Venezuelan people. That land also not belong to the United States, belong to the Venezuelan people.
And as you heard, that woman says she wants to go back to Venezuela. She believes she will do that in the next year. Now, all the people we spoke with, they say that right now in Venezuela, there is so much fear and so much uncertainty about what is going to happen next. That's the very latest here. I'm Masha Saidi, CBS News, New York.
Masha, thank you. And the United Nations Security Council held an emergency briefing this morning on the U.S. operation in Venezuela. That country's ambassador charged the U.S. is after Venezuela's oil. U.S. Ambassador Michael Waltz responding.
Nicolás Maduro is responsible for attacks on the people of the United States, for destabilizing the Western Hemisphere, and illegitimately repressing the people of Venezuela.
And we cannot ignore a central element of this U.S. aggression. Venezuela is the victim of these attacks because of its natural resources. Our country's oil, energy, strategic resources, and geopolitical position have historically been factors of greed and external pressure.
Colombia requested the emergency briefing.
Stay with CBS News New York for continuing coverage of the case against Maduro. We'll bring you updates on today's hearing and what's next for Maduro and Venezuela. And for more in-depth coverage tonight, watch the official debut of the CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel at 6:30 on CBS News New York.
Turning now to our weather. Live look outside right now. We could see some flurries this afternoon.
Tony Sadiku is tracking that and more in our first alert forecast. Tony.
Hi, Cindy. Hi, Mary. Some areas have already seen a few flakes and a few flurries as we track this Clipper system moving out through. Just earlier, we were watching the snow was just moving north of I-80. Now you could see the edge there, right where New Jersey and New York border. So it's parts of Rockland County, heads up in Suffern to Spring Valley. Some of this is lifting to the north, so right across the Hudson into a place like Tarrytown, Ossining, Cortland, watch out there. Monroe to Middletown, stowing pretty good. Eastern, Sullivan, and Ulster. All part of the system. Main energy is lifting to the north, but we're on the southern fringe of it. Yeah, that's materialized a few flakes. A lot of this is going to be very light accumulations, but the clouds are here. And as you check out the first alert flyby and the Chevy chopper there, you can see it's not really snowing so much in the city. Still, we'll keep in that chance as we show you. Of course, there's a chill as we kick off this first full week of the new year. Temperatures sufficiently cold that we've got flakes that are sticking, and that'll be the case for the next couple of hours, you'll see, before those chances diminish. Meanwhile, temperatures staying on the chilly side for now. But Cindy and Mary, chances are we're shedding layers in a matter of days as some welcome warmth returns. We'll have more on those temperatures when I see you in just a bit.
Tony, thank you. A vehicle crashes through the wall of a high school in New Jersey. Our Christine Sloan joins us live from Elizabeth. And Christine, what can you tell us?
Well, Mary, as you can see behind me, crews are busy at work trying to repair that damage, and the school district says that damage is significant. If you can see beyond the trucks, there is a gaping hole in the wall of Elizabeth High School's Dwyer Auditorium. The good news is there were no serious injuries. Just one student was taken to the hospital as a precaution for a leg injury. Now, let's take a look at the video. This all unfolded just shortly after 8 o'clock this morning. Authorities say the car was initially observed driving erratically up the road on Bridge Street and going through a red light, heading toward Pearl Street, where the main high school campus sits. The vehicle then, investigators say, drove over the curb and sidewalk and careened through the exterior wall of the auditorium, sending bricks all over the place. Thankfully, as I said, just minor injuries. That one student sustaining a leg injury and was transported to Beth Israel Hospital. The driver, officials say, also had minor injuries as was taken to University Hospital. The district says there was also a teacher in the auditorium, but that teacher was not injured. The school is open today, and officials say the building itself is structurally sound. Investigators are looking at surveillance video from inside the high school, and at this hour we have no idea why that car lost control and crashed into the auditorium of Elizabeth High School. We are live in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Christine Sloan, CBS News, New York.
Christine, thank you. And just ahead on CBS News New York, 2 firefighters hurt battling a massive fire at a Bronx deli. The help today for the people forced out of their homes.
Minnesota daycares under fire, accused of fraud, now apparently cleared of wrongdoing. The political fallout and pressure and what it could mean for the governor's race there.
Popular weight loss medications getting more affordable and accessible. The plan to sell Wegovy pills directly to patients. A 5-alarm fire in the Bronx overnight leaves several families without a place to call home. Vanessa Murdoch is live in Morris Heights. Vanessa.
Cindy, this is truly a sad sight to behold this morning. Now, this fire started on the ground floor in the deli, then raged skyward, taking over all 5 stories of the building. 2 firefighters and 1 civilian did sustain minor injuries. Flames Flames resembling devil horns blasted through windows of a 5-story building at 1365 Finley Avenue as New Yorkers looked on in disbelief. Firefighters say they arrived on scene in just over 3 minutes, doused the flames, tamed them. Then smoke took over, billowing up the facade and pouring out of windows. As sun rose, the immense devastation became more visible. Charred debris, large and small, lined the sidewalk. The building bustling with life last night, now just a charred, empty shell. FDNY Chief Esposito recounted the challenges of fighting this early morning 5-alarm fire.
We had 3 cars parked on 3 different fire hydrants. When it's very cold like this, our operation is delayed. We had a little bit of an icing condition with the water.
Mayor Mamdani showed up on scene and spoke with those who left their homes with nothing but the clothes they were wearing.
I have a little daughter, and a boy. Now, their diapers, clothes, everything is inside.
At Taft, they're going to be providing you with blankets. They're going to be providing you with immediate resources.
He praised first responders and also highlighted preventable issues that slowed down the firefight.
There were a number of delays that took place to that fire response, partially because there were cars parked in front of fire hydrants and also because of a lack of working smoke alarms throughout this building. Those are things that are in our control, and we are going to be acting on those.
The Department of Buildings is actually on site right now, as you can see, investigating the structural integrity of what remains here. And the Red Cross, thankfully, is helping those residents who are displaced with short-term living situations and essentials at Taft High School. And that's what we heard Mayor Mamdani urging residents to take advantage of. We're live in the Morris Heights section of the Bronx today. Vanessa Murdoch, CBS News, New York.
Vanessa, thank you. And we're continuing to follow that breaking news. We have an armored car that has just left the courthouse. This is after former Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife pleaded not guilty to federal drug trafficking and weapons charges. Dan is in Chopper 2. What are you seeing right now?
So, Mary, that motorcade has just left 500 Pearl Street. There you see the NYPD vehicle with the special Sprinter van there with the doors open on the back, and that armored vehicle that just entered your screen, that is the one that left the courthouse just a few minutes ago. That is the one that has been carrying Nicolás Maduro and his wife to and from the different facilities around the city. Now, what you're watching here is just making their way from Pearl Street down to the FDR Drive. You can see the ramps of the Brooklyn Bridge coming into your video there. They will get on the drive. They will take the FDR down to the downtown heliport where the helicopters are waiting, and the couple will be loaded into one of those helicopters, and they will fly them down towards the down to the federal Metropolitan Detention Center, where they'll be transported back to that facility there. But again, we were watching this on Saturday. We were watching them do it this morning and see it doing it again. It's a very, very detailed procession that goes down. Many vehicles are usually involved in this to make sure they give the motorcade protection. But what you're watching right now is they're making their way onto the FDR Drive, Mary. And like I said, in a few minutes, they'll be down at the downtown heliport.
Dan, thank you.
All right, let's go out to Allie Bauman and Alice Gaynor live outside federal court in Lower Manhattan. And I know, Alice, you were in the courtroom.
Yeah, that's right. So Mary and Cindy, Alice just came out of the courtroom here. We were going through your notes as you were inside the courthouse, taking notes of what was going on in that pretty stunning arraignment. So walk us through the moment when Nicolás Maduro walked into the courtroom.
Right. So when he walked in, he was actually saying hello to the journalists gathered in the gallery. At one point, I believe he said Happy New Year. And if you remember that video the White House released from his so-called perp walk at the DEA headquarters, he had also said Happy New Year to those agents as well. So he was there. His wife was there. They were wearing similar outfits, I guess you could call them. He was wearing bright orange sneakers. His feet appeared to be shackled, tan pants. He had an orange V-neck jumpsuit top underneath and a navy blue top over that. He had his mustache, his gray hair, and both were wearing headphones because they were speaking to the judge through an interpreter. So right away, the judge started asking questions. He wanted to know basic questions. Are you Nicolás Maduro Moros? And right then, he started going off on a bit of a rant. And it was hard to hear the interpreter. She was not near the microphone, but basically he was saying, I'm the president of Venezuela. I was captured in my home in Caracas. And at one point, the judge had to cut him off and say, there'll be a time and place for that. That's not what we're here for today. I just want to know, are you who I'm asking you, who you are? Are you Nicolás Maduro Moros? And he said, yes, I am. Same question was posed to his wife. Both entered pleas of not guilty. And we actually ran through all of this twice, not clear why. But I want to read you a quote. Maduro actually had said, I'm innocent. I'm not guilty. I'm a decent man. I am still president of my country. And he was also asked if he understood his rights. The judge was reading him his rights. He had said, I was not aware of those, but you're reading to me now. I understand. Towards the end of the court proceeding, both were asked, did you understand? The interpreters today, they said, we understand. And Maduro said, actually, I understand. And I was taking a lot of notes. I'm concerned about those notes. I want to make sure they're private and they're mine. And, those are his notes. I did observe him quite often hunched over reading papers. Not sure if it was a copy of the indictment in front of him, but he was taking notes throughout the entire proceeding. And when he was leaving, he gathered up his papers, his notebook, and he was walking out with marshals. He did turn to the gallery and he appeared to say something to them. He might have said something to the effect of, I've been kidnapped and I'm still the president there. So the next court date will be March 17th. The defense was asked if they were able to come up with a date for motion schedule. And they said, well, we can't do that yet. The discovery in this case, the evidence is so voluminous, we need time to go through it. Prosecutors had no issue with that. So next time we will see them in court is March 17th. There was no bail application yet, but we anticipate in the future that one will be filed. So both of them remain in custody and they were led away.
Well, Alice, excellent reporting inside the courthouse there. What was your impression of Nicolás Maduro's demeanor as he was inside court? I mean, just, a few days ago, he was in a palace in Venezuela. Now he's sitting here in the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. How did he appear to you?
He appeared defiant in some of what we could hear the translator, what the interpreter was saying through the translation. Again, he was saying, I was captured, I'm a political prisoner. Some of the things he was saying, he said, I am president of Venezuela. So normally when you're asked to enter a plea, you just enter either not guilty or guilty, but he seemed to go on a rant 2 separate times, and the judge had to say, again, time and place for that, not right now. So there were some things he wanted to say, but he was a defendant, and as such, they remained at the defense table. There were no outbursts outside of those rants that the judge did cut off.
Now, you've covered so many arraignments here at the federal courthouse. This is obviously a very different type of arraignment, but did it seem like a different type of arraignment to you, or did it seem like arraignments you've seen many times before?
I'll tell you what, when I was just walking out of the courthouse, there are a lot of DEA agents over there and U.S. Marshals as well. One thing I want to point out, the Marshals, before the defendants entered the courtroom, they were checking under the chair, under the table. They always do that before someone enters, but leaving the courthouse now, it's impressive just the sheer amount of DEA agents that were in that lobby over there. So that is what I would say is different. Otherwise, we say it all the time. People who enter this courthouse, they are treated just like any other defendant. Security may be different, but in the way they're spoken to in the courtroom, I mean, there's one set of rules. There's the rule of law for everybody, and so that's what happened in that courtroom. It was as if it was any other defendant.
Really interesting stuff. Alice Gaynor, thank you so much. We'll have much more at 5 and 6 for now. Marion and Cindy, back to you.
Very much. So many questions of the legality of the Trump administration's actions in Venezuela in the case against Maduro.
Let's bring in legal expert Rich Schoenstein for more analysis and context. Thank you so much for speaking with us. And now that Maduro has been officially charged, what comes next in this case?
Well, this case is going to proceed like any other criminal prosecution. That's my big takeaway from the proceeding this morning. They waived speedy trial. They waived reading of the indictment. They pled not guilty. And now the next stage of this case is going to be the defendants wanting the evidence that the government has against them so they can begin to prepare for trial. You may see some other things. They didn't make a bail application at this morning's proceeding, but they reserve the right to do so in the future. I don't know if they will. I don't know if they'll seek dismissal of the indictments based on various arguments they may make concerning their international status or potential deficiencies in the indictment. They could make motions. But you're going to move into the motions and discovery phase of this prosecution.
Rich, what do prosecutors need to prove to get a conviction?
Well, think of this case, this is a conspiracy case against people who allegedly are on the top of a very broad, very vast conspiracy to pump drugs into the United States, both to sell drugs and to do harm in the United States. And they're really going to need to prove that those high-ranking government officials were involved in and responsible for those activities. And as you know from a lot of cases you cover, it's really hard to get the people at the top.
Legal expert Richard Schoenstein, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Maduro's capture has been met with strong reactions from Venezuelans, some happy that he's been arrested, others angry with the United States actions.
Masa Said has been live in Lower Manhattan speaking with people on both sides. Masa.
Hi there, Mary, Cindy. So after I spoke with you about 20 minutes ago, I've been walking around, taking a look at the crowd. It appears to have grown. As you said, there are dueling protests that are happening. You might be able to hear people singing, chanting, lots of signs, people that are happy about the capture of Nicolás Maduro and people that are upset about it. As I said, we have been speaking with Venezuelans in the crowd, people that believe that the actions of the president is just about taking the oil of Venezuela, and others who are just hopeful for a better future for their country, who tell me they've been forced to flee that country and they're hoping to go back. Now, from our vantage point, this has been largely a peaceful protest. You can see dozens and dozens of uniformed NYPD officers here around the courthouse. Everyone just gathered here in the center. There's a mix of both Venezuelans and Americans here, those, again, who support President Trump's actions and those who are against it. We'll stay out here and keep talking with people and bring you any new information as it happens. For now, that's the very latest in Manhattan. I'm Masa Saidi, CBS News, New York.
All right, Masa, thank you very much. All right, let's go back to federal court now with new information from Allie Bauman. Allie?
Yeah, well, actually, I've been talking to Alice Gaynor since, you last spoke with us. And Alice, you were telling me about some of the medical issues that were brought up in court. Go on that.
That's right. So we didn't get specific details, but the defense attorney for Nicolás Maduro Moros said that there are health and medical issues that will require some attention. Again, he did not disclose what those issues could be. The attorney for his wife did say that she appeared to have fractured or severe bruising on her ribs, potentially stemming from when she was taken into custody. So the attorneys were asking, is there some sort of form we could fill out for medical attention? The judge said, both will receive full medical attention. So we don't specifically know what Maduro's health and medical concerns are, but there are some. And again, it appears his wife may have had some injuries when they were taken into custody over in Venezuela.
Interesting. And no bail application put in, so presumably they're going back to MDC in Brooklyn, where they'll be until...
And there could be a bail application in the future. Again, his private attorneys, they were just retained and filed a notice of appearance today. He previously, I think, had been assigned some attorneys, but now they've got these private attorneys, so they just essentially took on these clients. They've got to go through everything. So we do anticipate in the future there will be a bail application. Whether or not that would ever be granted, flight risk concerns and whatnot, we'll have to wait and see.
And that could be put in before their next court date in March?
Yeah, so the next court date is not until March 17th. The judge asked if they could set up a motion schedule, and the defense said there's a lot to go through with this case, so we just don't think that's appropriate at this time. Prosecutors agreed, yes, they need the time to go through everything. So they did waive the speedy trial time as well. So March 17th will be essentially, I guess, a status update for this case, and that's when we would see them next in the courtroom.
And I imagine a bail application then would bring up a whole other litany of issues.
Right, of course, there's a lot of legal issues here at play, and I just want to note, I know Masa is showing you some of the demonstrators. It is packed outside this federal courthouse. Unfortunately, our camera can't exactly pan around, but we've got demonstrators outside of the courthouse here. There is order being kept. You've got the NYPD here, and I pointed out before, as I was leaving the courthouse, a lot of DEA agents were in the lobby of that courthouse, more than I've ever seen before. So that's the one thing that stands out when you think of the high-profile cases we've covered here at the courthouse. Just so many DEA agents, because again, this is a case that involves weapons and drug charges.
Yes, this courthouse has seen a lot of high-profile cases recently, especially in the past year even, and this is another one that is drawing out large crowds, large police presence here.
Cindy?
All right, Alice and Allie, thank you very much.
We're continuing to following this breaking news for you as we await this transport to a helipad. This is off the FDR that will bring Nicolás Maduro and his wife back to the Brooklyn Detention Center. We are watching this throughout the morning. Now, we did see him leave court and go into that armored vehicle, and now we are following that transport and waiting for them to head to the helipad. Again, the former Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro, and his wife pleading not guilty today to federal drug trafficking and weapons charges. At the prison where they will be going is Lisa Rosner. And what do we know, Lisa?
Hi, Cindy and Mary. Well, right now we are waiting for Maduro and his wife to arrive at the Metropolitan Detention Center. As you said, they were taken away from court in an armored vehicle, and we're not sure if we're going to see that armored vehicle at this specific entrance. Now, I don't know how much of the jail you can see behind me because this is a major road. There's a truck behind us at the moment waiting at a light. But we do know that when they were taken away from this facility this morning, it was not through this entrance. It was through a different entrance that is not typically accessible to the public. Right now, here at the Metropolitan Detention Center, things are pretty quiet. Yesterday, I was here covering the story last night. There were some expatriates who were here, similar to what you see outside the courthouse today, people rallying with different emotions. Right now, it is quiet, and we are waiting for Maduro and his wife to be brought back here to the jail. We do know that sources have told CBS News that at least up until this court hearing, him and his wife were being held at the top floors of the detention center. We know that this is a notorious jail facility that some defense attorneys have said is known for pretty bad conditions, where they have been telling us that the jail tends to keep the temperature very cold. The food is not consumable. That's what we've been hearing from defense attorneys that have had defendants held here before. So right now, as you can see behind me, there has been, just in the last few minutes, an increased police presence. We are waiting to see when Maduro and his wife will arrive, and we'll bring that reporting to you as soon as it happens.
All right, Lisa Rosner, thank you. Chopper 2 is tracking the convoy's movements. Let's get out to Dan Rice. And Dan, what are you seeing now?
So we're coming back up the west side right now. The original plan, from what we were told, was that the motorcade would go to the Wall Street downtown heliport, and they would use the helicopters to fly back to Brooklyn, but it appears that the motorcade went under the Battery Park underpass. At this point, it is not quite clear where the motorcade has gone. It looks like they could be driving through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. They could be going to the west side. So we're going to just search around the west side of Manhattan to see if we pick up the motorcade anywhere. But at this point, it's not clear which path they're going to take to bring the Maduros back to the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Well, we know you'll be following it for us. Dan, thanks so much. And again, the appearance in court's kicking off what is likely to be months of legal proceedings in the lead up to a potential criminal trial. And defense lawyers said neither Maduro nor Flores are seeking release in the lead up. So no bail application just yet. Alice?
Yeah, we were listening to your wrap-up just now, and Allie, I know earlier in your reporting you were mentioning arraignments are usually quick, and that's true. This one was about 30 minutes long, so about what we expected it to be, because again, they were not yet arguing for bail. They said that they may put in a bail application in the future, but for now, they did not place one today, which is why you're watching them take him back to NDC as well as his wife as well. They're going back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, and it was interesting because we seem to go through everything twice, Allie, in court. Not exactly sure why.
You had two co-defendants there, Maduro and his wife?
It might be because Maduro started going on this rant and the judge had to cut him off, so a lot was said. So I don't know if that's why the judge went back later and said, okay, let's arraign, even though both had already entered not guilty pleas. We heard them go through it yet again. Maduro said a lot in that courtroom, which during an arraignment, typically you're just asked, who are you? Are you the person we're asking you? You know, you enter your plea. He went on 2 different rants where the judge had to cut him off and say, hey, there's going to be a time and place for that now. I just want to know, are you the person I'm asking you? Are you Nicolás Maduro Moros? And he said, I am. Eventually, his wife, Celia Flores, was asked the same thing. She also mentioned that she started to go on a little bit of a rant and say, I'm the first lady of Venezuela. And the judge also cut her off and said, again, we will do this at another time. This is just, you know, an arraignment. They'll be back in court March 17th. So again, the whole thing took about 30 minutes. The judge also asked him, you know, do you understand your rights? Have you been read your rights before? Maduro said he hadn't heard them before, but the judge was telling him now. He said he understood that, and in fact, he was taking notes the entire time. I saw him furiously taking notes, hunched over. I did not see Flores taking notes, but he was, and at the end, he had some concerns about where would those notes end up. You know, will they be kept private? Are they my notes? And the prosecutor said, yeah, we'll work with marshals to make sure they're appropriately maintained. He gathered up his notes, and when he walked out, he turned to the gallery and said something. So it's sort of like when we see defendants, high-profile defendants, you know, not to compare Sean Diddy Combs with with this former president.
But another
of Venezuela,
high-profile defendant.
Both seem to go in there and sort of try to charm the press in there, talk to them, good morning, happy new year. So we've seen that a lot from defendants in this courtroom. He turned and was saying different things to the gallery. And again, happy new year. That's what he said to the DEA agents when he was walked through their headquarters the other night. So, Allie, I don't know if you want to talk about what's going on out here, because these are some big crowds.
These are
We've been out here for a while.
These are some big crowds out here, and almost dueling protests happening with people who are against the capture of Maduro in Venezuela versus people here who are waving the Venezuelan flag, are wearing clothes with shrouded with the Venezuelan flag, who are very in support of his arrest and his being in court right now. Now, one thing that stood out to me when I was going through your notes as you were in the courthouse that seemed kind of interesting was that the judge actually interrupted, as you said, Maduro multiple times, his wife multiple times. A typical defendant wouldn't be a good sign if a judge is cutting you off and interrupting you and saying enough, right? So did you get that impression that the judge was annoyed and cutting him off, or did it seem business as usual?
No, the judge was very even. In fact, it felt like he let him go on this rant for a little while. Again, it may be because he was speaking in Spanish. We had to wait for the interpreter to chime in. So that may be why he got so many words in like he did, because it had to be translated. But no, the judge was very calm and just, stuck to the legal script essentially, and said, again, there will be a time and place for that. But now, I just want to know, are you this person, and what's your plea? And both entered their own pleas. Both said, I'm innocent. He at one point said, I'm a decent man. And he said, I'm still the president of Venezuela.
Yeah.
And he claims he was kidnapped, he was captured. We heard all of that from his own mouth in the courtroom today.
Yeah, it sounds like the judge was trying to keep this as typical of an arraignment as possible.
Right.
If that's even possible for it to be a typical arraignment under the circumstances. So basically, the Maduro and his wife were wearing headphones for their interpreting. Yeah. They were responding in Spanish, and then the interpreter would go through it. So when the judge cut them off, that's cutting them off as they're speaking in their native tongue.
And the judge asked at the end, did you understand the interpreter? And they both agreed, yes, we did. They gave the interpreter's name. I mean, everything needs to be really buttoned up in any court case, but especially in this federal case involving a political figure from another country. So the judge, again, we went through everything twice. So that's interesting, but it's all on the record. It's all there. And so we'll see March 17th, how this case proceeds. Again, they just retained private attorneys. One of them was the WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. It was his attorney. You have another attorney, former federal prosecutor. So going to be looking at that. And they just, took on these clients. So they couldn't put in a bail application just yet. They need all the discovery that they need to go through. So eventually they do, it seems, plan to apply for bail, but that didn't happen today. So again, they were walked out of the courtroom and both wearing what appeared to be, he had bright orange sneakers, looked like tan prison pants, an orange jumpsuit with a navy V-neck jumpsuit over that. And again, both were wearing headphones, and their hands were not shackled. They were at the defense table, and marshals were in there keeping an eye on things. So by all accounts, this went kind of like any other court proceeding here. I mean, nothing really, if we didn't know who he was and it were not for all these crowds outside, it would have just been like any other defendant.
And they weren't wearing street clothes. They weren't wearing a suit. Did that stand out to you? Did that seem normal to you?
So because these are pre-trial proceedings, typically defendants don't wear a suit or anything like that. It's usually when they're at trial because they don't want the jury to see them wearing, their inmate clothing. Occasionally, when it's a high-profile case, they will get permission if their attorneys go ahead and file and ask the judge, hey, can they have, 5 pairs of pants or whatever for these proceedings? We don't want them to be photographed wearing this. That would taint the jury pool. But this is federal court, so there's no photos anyway. So I did think about that because I was thinking about Luigi Mangione, of course, the suspected killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, and how he's been allowed with permission granted by the court to wear certain clothing. That's been in the state court because he's photographed there. Those images are widespread. Here in federal court, there's no cameras, so potential jurors wouldn't be seeing them.
Maybe the court sketches?
Clothing. Yeah, maybe in the court sketches, which will come out today if they're not already out, but yeah.
And so Maduro was seated next to his wife at the defense table.
So there's Flores' attorney was in between them. And at one point, Flores' attorney was whispering to Maduro. Don't know, what they were saying, but each have their own representation.
Did the couple interact at all?
I didn't see that at all. I didn't see that. And again, they were separated by at least an attorney at all times, so I didn't see them interact. No.
Because as far as we know, they're both being held at MDC in Brooklyn, which does have a women's section, a men's section. Presumably they're not interacting there, though. But as far as we know, they're not being held in solitary confinement at MDC Brooklyn.
No word on that yet. I've reached out to the Bureau of Prisons for more information, but have not yet heard back. So hopefully we'll get some sort of follow-up from them today.
All right, Alice, thank you so much. Cindy, Mary, back to you.
Alice, thanks so much. And Maduro facing 4 counts of narco-terrorism, could spend decades in prison if convicted, in conspiracy to import cocaine and weapons-related offenses as well. We are now waiting for them to be brought back to the detention center in Brooklyn.
That's right, and that's where Lisa Rosner is outside the jail, tracking their return. And Lisa, any movement out there?
Well, Cindy and Mary, in the last, I would say, 20 minutes, we have seen more police come outside the Metropolitan Detention Center, just standing guard here. If you can see outside the gates, there is a group of NYPD on both sides of the entrance to the Metropolitan Detention Center, as well as you see a police car with its lights on. And then the other people gathered here are mostly members of the media. Now, I want to remind you, this is right off of 3rd Avenue. This is a major road that leads right from the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. However, when we saw Nicolás Maduro and his wife taken from this detention center earlier this morning, it was not through this entrance. It was through a different entrance that the public really cannot get access to. But like I said, there are more police that we are seeing here in the last couple minutes. Sources tell us that at least up until this court appearance, sources tell CBS News that Maduro and his wife were being held towards the top floors of the Metropolitan Detention Center. As you had mentioned in the coverage, they are now being taken in an armored vehicle. Now, I had looked at Google Maps. It takes about 20 minutes right now to get from the courthouse at 500 Pearl to the Metropolitan Detention Center. So if that is the case, we do expect them to be appearing sometime soon. Of course, there's presumed to be a level of security measures that they will have to go through before they can enter the facility again. But right now, from what we are seeing outside, more police presence, more media coming here as we await their return to the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Lisa, thank you.
All right, let's get some more analysis on the criminal trial.
Rich Schoenstein joins us once again. Thank you very much for taking some time. Now, Maduro was first indicted in March of 2020 during the first Trump administration, and the superseding indictment unsealed Saturday adds new co-defendants and alleges that for more than 25 years, Maduro and his associates partnered with drug cartels to distribute cocaine to the U.S. As we take a look at the convoy leading to the Metropolitan Detention Center, giving you a live look from Chopper 2 right now, can you tell us what will it take to prove this case? What will it take to get a conviction here?
Well, obviously, you've just outlined a massive case, both in scope and time frame. It goes back 25 years. It's talking about Maduro being at the head of an organization in an effort to pump drugs into the United States, both for profit and to do harm in the United States. And it's going to have to prove that that was happening, that he was active, that he was engaged in that effort, that he conspired with others. We don't know yet if any of the additional co-defendants, other than his wife, are going to be brought into the United States and made part of these proceedings, or if they'll be available as witnesses. But it's a very hard case to prove because it is so extensive in time and scope.
And Rich, this is going to take a long time. I mean, March 17th is the status hearing, but how long do you think until the trial starts and we get to the end of this?
I would be surprised, very surprised, to see a trial in the year 2026. I think you're at least into next year. By the time you get through the discovery process, preliminary motions, pretrial motions like we've seen in some recent cases, this is going to be a long process. They waived the speedy trial right. So I think you're going to be in 2027 before you see a trial in this case.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your insight. Rich Schoenstein, legal expert. Rich, thank you very much.
And let's get you back to Chopper 2, tracking the convoy's movements. And let's get out to Dan Rice. What are you seeing now, Dan?
So, Mary, a convoy has just left the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, and they're currently on the Gowanus Expressway. That would be an easy route to get down to the Metropolitan Detention Center. Now, I have to point out, this is actually a different-looking convoy than the one that we saw leave 500 Pearl Street. The armored vehicle that we saw with that convoy is no longer part of this one. It's quite possible, and we saw this Saturday night when they brought Nicolás Maduro down with the choppers, that they would change vehicles from a black SUV to the armored vehicle. So it's possible that they may have switched the vehicles around after they left Pearl Street there. But this convoy is heading down towards the Metropolitan Detention Center, and of course we'll keep an eye and see if it does pull into that area. But it does appear that's where they're heading right now, Mary and Cindy.
Thank you. Maduro's capture has been met with strong reactions from Venezuelans, some happy that he has been arrested, others angry with the United States' actions.
And Masa Saidi is live in Lower Manhattan speaking with people on both sides. Masa.
And Mary, Cindy, the dueling protests are still underway. I would say the crowd has slightly dispersed a little bit. Well, we are continuing to speak with people from Venezuela. I just spoke with a gentleman, Eduardo Gonzalez. He left Venezuela in 2015, escaping violence and poverty, he told me. Early Saturday morning, he says he got a call from his mom in Caracas. She shared pictures and videos of explosions that were happening outside of her window. He tells me when he found out that the president of his country had been captured, he was so happy he cried. Listen.
Here celebrating with everyone from Venezuela because this is an historic moment for us. It's been too long that we've been suffering from this regime, and it's been a crazy emotions lately. This is one of the best days of my life, celebrating and seeing all this going on after all that we've been suffering.
I support the independence of Venezuela. That always over there and belong to the Venezuelan people. That land also not belong to the United States, belong to the Venezuelan people.
And that man who is upset about the actions taken by President Trump, he is concerned about what will happen to Venezuela's oil. Now, I asked Mr. Gonzalez what he thought about that, and he said, well, he hopes that people in his country get more access to the resources, but he says in his lifetime, they haven't seen it. So now he's hopeful for the future. That's the very latest in Lower Manhattan. I'm Masa Saidi, CBS News, New York.
Masa, thank you.
And again, Nicolás Maduro and his wife are on their way back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn after being arraigned at federal court. That's where we find Ali Bauman and Alice Gaynor. And Alice, can you tell us about the private attorneys that will now represent them? Were you surprised by the choices?
No, wasn't surprised. That was the big question this morning. Everyone was wondering who were they going to retain? Were they just going to be assigned attorneys? And I believe at first they were assigned, but then they brought on these two gentlemen to be his attorneys, and I can give you their names. Maduro's attorney is Barry Pollack. Flores' attorney is Mark Donnelly. So they were in the courtroom today. Again, they just took on these clients, so they've got a lot of work ahead of them. And Ali, I just wanted to mention, because we were just talking about it, you know, what happened? We went through what they were wearing and what happened when they sat down. But let's talk about the judge. You know, right off the bat, he said good morning to the defendants, and he said that he, oh, sorry, thought somebody was off to the side trying to get our attention. And he said, you know, my job in these pretrial proceedings is to ensure this is a fair trial and fair proceedings. That's my job, and that's my intent. He went on to summarize the indictment, and he asked Maduro and Flores, have you read the indictment yet? And they said, we haven't, but we want to do that privately. So the judge first just summarized the charges. As we know, there's 4 counts, narco-terrorism conspiracy from on or about 1999 to 2025. He said they knowingly conspired with others, intentionally providing to organizations engaged in terrorist activity in violation of U.S. Code. Count 2, cocaine importation conspiracy. Again, they didn't go specifically into the details of the indictment because both defendants waived a reading of that in the courtroom. That would have taken some time. The other counts, of course, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. Maduro, throughout all this, taking notes. We don't know what those notes said. He was very protective of the notes towards the end. And again, right away, the first question the judge asked, are you Nicolás Maduro Moros? And right away, Maduro said in Spanish quite a bit, hard to hear the interpreter. She was away from the microphone, but what we could hear was that he said he's the president of Venezuela and that he was captured at his home. The judge cut him off and said, at this point, only want to know, are you Nicolás Maduro Moros? To which he said, I am Nicolás Maduro Moros. Again, he waived that reading of the indictment. He said, after the judge read him his rights, I did not know of these rights. Your Honor is informing me of them now. And through the interpreter, he said, I'm innocent. I'm not guilty. I'm a decent man. I am still president of my country. And Ali, as we were talking about, during an arraignment, we usually just hear either you're going to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. But he took this time to, really go on and say a couple of things he wanted to say. And Flores's attorney entered a plea of not guilty on her behalf. But then the judge said, let's arraign. So for some reason, we went through the whole thing yet again.
So it's as if two separate arraignments in one room, one for Maduro, one for Flores.
It's unclear why the judge went through everything again, seeking clarification on that. But Maduro was asked, have you seen a copy of the indictment? He said, I have seen it, but have not read it at this moment, waiving a reading of it. And again, he said, I'm innocent. I'm not guilty of anything that is mentioned here. That's a direct quote. Flores then started to go, and I keep saying the word rant. She's tried to say more than she's supposed to and was like, I'm the first lady of Venezuela. Again, judge said, our purpose here is to ask who you are. The attorney gave her a summary of the indictment, but she also had not read the exact details. She did not want that read in court as well. Maduro was told he has the right to remain silent. Of course, anything said can be used against you. Both of them said, I understood. I hear what you're saying. Flores said, quote, I am not guilty, completely innocent. The judge asked for the date and time of arrest, and this is what prosecutors said. They said Maduro and his wife entered U.S. military custody at 11:30 a.m. January 3rd, 2026. They were transported by police to SDNY landing at 4:31 p.m. on January 3rd. We know, Ali, you were there at DEA headquarters on Saturday. Do you want to talk about that experience at all? Because I was actually in traffic on the West Side Highway. I had just been at the Metropolitan Detention Center, was coming back to the broadcast center. It was a dead stop traffic on the West Side because he was brought to that heliport right over there.
Yes, we were actually on like two different sides of the avenue almost, where I was outside DEA headquarters, which is in Chelsea on 11th Avenue. You were on the West Side Highway, so just on the other side of the building there, essentially. And we got there. As soon as the helicopter touched down in Manhattan, now this was Saturday, as soon as the helicopter touched down in Manhattan, that is from coming back from Stewart Airport, that is when I think they froze that entire zone. They froze the street that we were on. It appears that they froze the West Side Highway that you were on. So cars could not be getting through. And then, I mean, it was a huge, motorcade of cars coming through, vehicles coming through, heavily armored. They had the Bearcat vehicle, which is that almost military-grade truck, it looks like, armored truck, getting through and driving right into the DEA headquarters garage there, which is a pretty unassuming building. There really isn't any signage. You wouldn't know it was DEA headquarters unless you knew it was. And they were in there for maybe about an hour or so before the Bearcat then came back out, and that was when he was brought back to the helipad and flown back or flown over to Brooklyn. So a major scene there with NYPD. There really otherwise, though, weren't any protesters, the way we're seeing protesters here, the way we've been seeing protesters outside of MDC. And I don't even know if protesters is the right word to use them, because they're people who are happy for his arrest, who are glad for his arrest. So we've seen a large portion. There's still a lot of people on the other side of the camera here that are, waving that Venezuelan flag. Very happy to see him here. There's been, throughout the weekend, large crowds outside MDC as well. People who have even traveled from out of state going to MDC because they said they wanted to see it for themselves. This is the facility that Nicolás Maduro is being held in. So it's really just been a scene that has taken over, New York City, multiple boroughs, in terms of people wanting to witness this really stunning moment in history of Venezuela's president being tried essentially here, or being brought into court here. In New York City that we've seen.
And you've been outside all morning. Obviously, huge presence of media here from all over the world. But let's talk about crowd size, because we've got people and just the order, that law enforcement is keeping here at this courthouse. What have you noticed since you got here this morning?
Yes, NYPD is almost used to it at this point because of how many high-profile cases we've had at this courthouse to have large crowds out here. I mean, as you know, there was such a large crowd outside for the Diddy trial that happened here. Anytime Luigi Mangione is in court, there's a huge scene out here. So they have a lot of barricades outside here, and this is no exception. The entire place the traffic is open. You can still walk through and drive through, but in terms of the sidewalk, the pedestrian areas, it is really on lockdown almost. These barricades all behind us. You have to kind of find your way through the maze.
More barricades actually than they usually do. So you've got these barricades right behind Allie, and then there's another set behind her. So they are really doing a great job, I have to say. Here, we haven't seen any violence or anything.
It hasn't been any kind of clashes. I mean, there are protesters and stuff out here. It hasn't been any kind of clashes. But now that the arraignment is over, perhaps the crowd's size will wrap up in a little bit. Mary and Cindy, back to you.
Allie and Alice, thank you for your comprehensive coverage.
Now we want to go back to Chopper 2, which has been tracking the convoy's movements. Let's get out to Dan Rice. And Dan, what are you seeing now?
So we were tracking that convoy that came out of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. It came down the Gowanus Expressway. As Ali was talking about the frozen zones in Manhattan that we saw on Saturday night, they were doing the same thing on the Gowanus. They stopped all traffic coming off of the BQE, and they brought this convoy down to the 39th Street exit, I believe it is, and came down 2nd Avenue. And what you're looking at now is this big building over here on the right side. That's the Metropolitan Detention Center, and it's the same thing that we saw on Saturday night when they brought the Maduros from the helicopter to this facility. They had a large convoy of vehicles that pulled up to the 2nd Avenue side, and 2 of the vehicles went into this gate, pulled down this driveway, and there's a garage right there where you see that marking on the pavement, and we saw that with the convoy today. 2 of the vehicles pulled out of the convoy, pulled onto that street, and they drove them into that building. Now, as I said earlier, we saw that Bearcat vehicle leave Pearl Street, but we haven't seen it since, but it's the same scene that we saw on Saturday. 2 vehicles pulling out of a convoy into that building, and that appears to be where the Nicolás Maduro and his wife were taken this time. Same scenario on Saturday. We saw it again today.
Rice, thank you.
And let's head on the ground now, and outside the detention center, we find Lisa Rosner. Lisa.
Well, Mary and Cindy, we are trying to confirm right now that Maduro and his wife were taken to this detention center. As you heard, the chopper was over several vehicles which came in. Now, I want to set the scene for you. We're on the 3rd Avenue entrance to the detention center right now. This is only where we see police letting media in, as well as onlookers who want to see the detention center for themselves. So we're going to push in a little bit so you can get a feel for just that 2nd Avenue entrance. That is all the way down. It is another avenue from where we are. If you look and you see there's police here on 3rd Avenue, but further in there is even more of a police presence. And that is what we are able to see from our vantage point. We know that Maduro was taken from court in an armored vehicle, and our chopper did see several SUVs making their way to the detention center here in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Right now, as I was saying earlier, there have been more and more police coming outside the detention center to provide extra security here. We know that this detention center is notorious. It's where Luigi Mangione has been held, Sean Diddy Combs, and sources tell CBS News that prior to the arraignment hearing this morning, that Maduro and his wife were being held towards the top floors of the detention center. Right now, a lot of activity here. It's a busy road, 3rd Avenue. It leads right from the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And like I said, we are waiting to confirm that Maduro and his wife were in those vehicles that we saw enter on the 2nd Avenue side to the detention center. We'll send it back to you.
Lisa, thank you.
And thank you for watching our special coverage on the arraignment of former Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. I'm Cindy Hsu.
And I'm Mary Calvi. We will have much more analysis and reaction coming up on the news at 5, 6, and 11. We'll see you then.
This has been breaking news.
This is CBS News, New York.
Hi, everyone. Tony Sadiq with an update on your first alert forecast as we continue on what's been an